you guys could see what I've done right now to prop you up, you would all be laughing at me. Hi everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I have recently DNF'd. I haven't actually done a video on this at all this year, and normally I do kind of quarterly or half yearly DNF videos, so I do have quite a few to talk about. I'm just looking through the list now and I don't have loads to say about a lot of them because most of them I actually just found quite boring and didn't really have much to sort of go off in terms of discussing them. So I thought I might do something a little different today. So the plan is for me to tell you the books that I have DNF'd so far this year, obviously, and then I also want to take a look at the statistics that I've recorded and see if there are any kind of trends in the types of books that I'm DNFing, like whether they're mostly YA books or contemporary books and things like that, to kind of get a better idea of what it is that isn't drawing me into these books. You guys know that I really like statistics, so doing this, it should be quite interesting. I don't have loads of data on these, I'm going to be honest, but there should be enough here to pick out any trends if there are any. But I would also like to keep in mind the kind of books that I'm leaning towards nowadays. For example, if most of my DNFs are adult books, the reason for that is because I'm leaning towards picking up adult books rather than adult books being terrible for me, if that makes sense. Without further ado, let me just quickly tell you the books that I've DNF'd so far this year. There are 21 that I have recorded. I can't remember if there are maybe a few more that I've put on pause rather than strong DNFing. That may be the case, but at this point I can't remember, and I don't record my DNFs on my wrap-ups anyway because I don't really have much to say about them, so we're going to go with 21. The first one I DNF'd this year was Picture Perfect by Jodi Picoult, and this also spurred me on to unhaul a bunch of her other books because I just couldn't get into the writing style, and I think I went through a phase of picking up all of her books from charity shops after My Sister's Keeper came out, and I really wanted to enjoy them because some of the subject matters do get quite dark and I was really interested in them. This one I can't remember actually what it's about, and I didn't like the way that the author was writing about a Native American main character. I don't know if it was good representation or not. I didn't get far enough to figure that out, but I figured a book written in 1997 by Jodi Picoult might not be the best, so I DNF'd it and got rid of a bunch of others, although I did keep a couple of other books of hers just in case I'm in the mood for them. I DNF'd The Night Watchman, which was actually my book club pick for work before everything kicked off and I stopped doing book club. This is a historical fiction novel and I loved the concept and premise of this one. I can't remember much about it now, but it was very intriguing to me and I loved the cover. I just couldn't get into it and I read 65 pages and just had to stop. I DNF'd Haunting Violet, which is an old school YA book. I just couldn't get into it and I wasn't really in the mood for paranormal, so I stopped that. More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. I couldn't get into this one because of the writing style. I read a good probably 45 pages. I didn't like any of the characters, so I didn't bother to continue. Hamnet, I DNF'd this one because again I found it quite boring. I didn't like the writing style. The author I think was trying to be very sort of whimsical and vague in some of her descriptions because of the subject matter, and she was trying to keep it a secret that it was like Shakespeare's son and family. I just didn't go on with it, so I've DNF'd it. I might pick it up in the future. It might be one that I revisit like in the far future, but it's not one that I wanted to carry on reading this year. Vesper is another old school YA one that I just couldn't get on with. I read 50 pages of this one. I finally DNF'd One Way because this has been on my TBR for the longest time. I received an arc of it and I was meant to read it years ago. I think it came out in like 2015 and I just never had the energy to pick it up. I gave this one last final go and told myself if I couldn't get through it then I would get rid of it because there's no point in having it on my TBR, especially as I'm trying to reduce my TBR pile this year, so I got rid of that one. I'm quite glad that I did because I wasn't enjoying it. I DNF'd Darkness Becomes Her, another old school YA book. I read about 20 to 30 pages of this one. Couldn't go on with it. It's again paranormal YA. I'll talk about this in the stats. It's just not my thing anymore. Parable of the Sower. I really struggled with the writing style of this one. I wasn't really interested in the world building, unfortunately, because it did sound quite good, but the way that the author was describing it I just didn't really like. So I DNF'd The Paris Apartment, which came out this year. I found this one to be an incredibly boring thriller mystery, which is a shame because I've really enjoyed the author's other books. I think this is definitely her worst one by far. I've put The Grace of Kings down as a DNF. I did actually get to the end, but that's because I skim read chunks in the middle of it, because I didn't really like this fantasy book at all. I found it very boring, so I couldn't put it down as having read it because I definitely skim read some parts of it. But the beginning and the end were quite good. It's just the middle like 200-300 pages were not good. I DNF'd The Deep, which is an adult horror book. This one just took ages to get going. It wasn't really what I was expecting from it. I really wanted a good horror story about the Titanic and it just took forever to get anywhere, and the horror stuff didn't start for another like 200 pages, so I didn't like this one. The Holiday, I DNF'd after 10 pages. Not much to say about this one, I just didn't like the writing style. The River, again, I DNF'd after 20 pages. I didn't like the writing style, and also the way that it's printed was also quite difficult to read because the pages were really thick and the writing was very spaced out, and I didn't like that. Maybe I could have given it another go as an ebook, but I just couldn't be bothered because I didn't love the writing style anyway. I DNF'd You Have a Match after 100 pages, which is a shame because I've read a book by this author before and really enjoyed it, but this one was very boring. I didn't like the characters. And it's kind of meant to be a story about discovering the main character's long lost sister and DNA matching and stuff, which is why I initially picked it up, but I don't think it was very well presented. I DNF'd Alone on the Ice as an audiobook, and the only reason for this one is because it was describing the people. They're not characters, they're actual people. They had to survive in Antarctica and eat the huskers, and I didn't really want to listen to the author describe that, so I DNF'd it. I DNF'd The Roommate, which is a romance book, because I didn't like the main ship or the main guy, even the love interest, and I'm really over this whole thing of the female being really sort of innocent and inexperienced and the guy being like basically a porn star, which is literally what he is in this book. I DNF'd Revolution, another old school YA but this time contemporary. After 20 pages I didn't like the writing style. I DNF'd The Weight of the Stars, which is a YA contemporary book but more modern one. This one I just didn't like any of the characters, I just didn't care, and they were all bullying the other girl who they then later become friends with, I think, and maybe she becomes a love interest, I don't know, but because of the bullying in the beginning I was kind of like, well, I'm not really buying into this, am I? I DNF'd History of Wolves, which is a literary fiction book. I just found this one quite boring, and it kind of glossed over abuse in the beginning, and I don't know if it goes back to it later, but it handled it in a very odd way, so I didn't want to carry on reading it. And then finally I DNF'd Red Clocks because of the writing style. It was very choppy and it jumped from one thing to another, and I could have perhaps gotten used to it, but I've tried twice now and I just couldn't do it, so yeah, not great. Okay, so now that I've rushed through all of those, although that still took quite a while, I'm going to talk about these statistics of my DNF. So I'm going to share my screen if it loads. Okay, I think we sorted it out. So here's my spreadsheet which shows all of the books that I've DNF'd. I filtered it by my DNF rating here. So this is all 21 of them. I'm going to go over to genre and create a chart to see which is the most common. And again, I want to bear in mind the kind of genres that I'm actually picking up, because if I'm picking up mostly contemporary books and I've DNF'd mostly contemporary, that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily mean that I hate contemporary. So looking at this chart here, it does look like contemporary is the most common DNF, but there's only 5 of them. Does that make sense? I suppose it does. And then thriller, again, is a genre that I'm reading a lot of, so it makes sense that there are 3 DNFs in there. Paranormal, there are 3 DNFs here, and I don't read a ton of paranormal books, so this is quite high considering, but it does look like I've got a mixture of genres here. Genres chart doesn't really tell me much because I could be DNFing anything, really. So yeah, it does make sense that contemporary is the highest because that matches with what I'm currently reading. If we look at intended audience, this is the thing that I spoke about earlier, make a chart for that. It does look as though I'm DNFing mostly adult books because again, that's what I'm leaning towards, but I am also DNFing a lot of YA. And the reason for this is because I am trying to get through a bunch of my backlist YA books from like 10 years ago. When I first started booktubing, I bought a ton of books and obviously didn't read them. So I'm making it a goal of mine to go through them and try to see if I still like them, first of all, to see if they still hold up. I've done a whole video on the first batch of these, but also to see if I'm still interested in them in the first place. The example of like Vesper, that's a really short paranormal book and it's very old school, from like 2010, and I just didn't like it. Same with Haunting Violet, that felt very old school to me and just didn't hold up. So yeah, I didn't love that. I did DNF a couple of slightly newer YA books. More Happy Than Not was 2015, so not the newest but not ancient either. You Have a Match is quite new, I think that came out last year, and The Weight of the Stars isn't super old either. Looking at series versus standalones, I haven't actually filled most of this in, but it does look like most of these are standalones, but again, I am picking up mostly standalone books this year. And then format, which is like physical books, ebooks, or audio. I am picking up mostly physical books, but not quite as many as this chart makes out. So I am DNFing more physical books than ebooks and audiobooks. I think I don't tend to DNF audiobooks because I have noticed that I am more likely to listen to a sample because I'm very picky with my audiobook narrators. So I listen to a sample first before I go ahead and purchase it or download it. The only reason I have DNF'd one audiobook is because of the actual content of the book. Otherwise I've been quite good about picking ones that I think I will enjoy. Ebooks, I haven't really been reading many of those this year, so I think I've DNF'd 2. One was Kindle Unlimited, which was The Holiday, and the other was from NetGalley. Should there not be one more? I think The Paris Apartment might have been an ebook as well. There we go. So I've DNF'd 3, and that matches up with the kind of ratio of ebooks to physical books that I'm reading. So it was interesting about the audiobook though. I'm doing quite well with choosing ones I think I'll enjoy. Release year, I couldn't find. Let's say that's like 2015. Is this chart going to make sense? No, it's not. 1 second. Okay, this is the best I can do with this living chart. It never works out on Google Sheets for some reason, but you can see here that most of the books that I've been reading have been slightly newer books in terms that they're after the year 2000. I only had DNF'd a couple from pre-2000. Those were Parable of the Sower and something else, I don't know what else. Oh, Picture Perfect by Jodi Picoult from 1996. You can see here that the others are pretty much spread over from 2010 all the way up to 2000 or 2022. In fact, I think there are slightly more which are newer, so from 2017 onwards, which is interesting because I thought I was DNFing a lot of old school YA books, but maybe that's not the case. I don't really need to look at diversity for this because that's not a reason for DNFing, I don't think. Type of publication, I haven't filled this in really annoyingly, but I think only one of them possibly is indie published, or 2 perhaps, and the rest are traditionally published. I should have filled in this publisher data, but I will do that before my next video, I think. And then here you can see the author status, so if they are new to me or ones that I've read before, and the majority are debut authors or new to me, or debut and new to me. So very few authors that I've read before I've DNF'd, but there have been a couple, like Lucy Foley. It does make sense that I'm DNFing authors that I've never come across before. I'm just less confident about those, but I still want to give them a go. And then in terms of when I acquired the books or what kind of purchase it was, most of the books that I've DNF'd are ones that I owned pre-2022, so they're older books, ones that I used to be really hyped for and I just no longer enjoyed. So I might have liked them in the past. It doesn't mean they're bad books, they just don't fit my reading tastes right now. That being said, there are only 8 of them, it's just that's the majority. A few of the books were library books, so I have saved some money there, which is good. And then some of them were books that I bought in 2022, probably because of the hype, to be honest, or things that I thought I was in the mood for. I would imagine these bought in 2022 ones match up with new to me or debut authors, because I'm just less familiar with them and I thought I'd enjoy them, but I didn't. And then I've got a couple of NetGalley books which I don't feel bad about at all. One Kindle Unlimited, one Audible and one Gift. So those are my reading stats for my DNFs, and obviously all the books that I DNF'd as well. Let me know if you've read any of these, how many books you've DNF'd this year, tell me your DNF stats, I'll be very interested to find those out. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll be back soon with another one. Bye!